It's about fight. It's about winning. It's about fighting corruption. It's about energy, and that's what I'm here for. And so people might be frustrated, like, why is he always bringing up AOC? Why is he always bringing up Bernie? It's because that's where I see the fight. And every time I see a feckless, a feckless moderate, it pisses me off.
Yeah, like literally in January when you were like going aggro at me, like I literally was being a feckless moderate. Within 2 months, he's managed to radicalize me into being like just full hardline anti-Trump. There's no path towards being like, oh, we'll just do Trumpism with like a little bit more moderate. Like, no, the whole thing has to be destroyed. Like, it's just a disaster. It's a full-blown disaster.
Hey, folks, please like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to check out my newsletter. Information is in the description.
Yeah. How are you going, man? I have to say, and this is very important when we started off the podcast, I have to say, Pisco was right.
No, I don't need this. I listen. Hey,
listen. I want to try explain myself.
Yeah.
Like I still think, on the subject of the grooming gangs in Britain, I still think that was incredibly fucked up. I still think that there were major problems. I still think there's major problems with Islamism in Britain and massive problems with cultural assimilation, stuff like that. On that subject, I still hold to my views. But where you were right was that Elon Musk was coming at it from obviously evil perspective, and I just underestimated how evil these guys were. Essentially, I was hoping against hope. I was essentially coping massively in the first like sort of week or two of the administration, just coping so badly because obviously as an Australian, we're very reliant on the American alliance. I was coping so hard. I was hoping that against all hope that it wouldn't be as bad as it has been. But obviously they've actually surpassed even my worst expectations in terms of evil. And for me, the breaking point was absolutely the Zelensky moment in the White House.
Oh yeah.
And I think actually that was a breaking point for a lot of people. Actually, I think all across the world, I think that you know how like there were all these headlines about the pro-Trump vibe shift and everything, and the Democrats were quite in disarray. The opposition to him wasn't crystallized in that first couple of weeks. But I think really after that Zelensky moment, it really did. I think the whole thing was very clear to people at that point, and certainly for me. And essentially since then as well, they've just like surpassed themselves in terms of evil. What they're doing now with the deportations of just innocent people as well to the gulag in El Salvador, just evil as hell. Hey, and like, I sort of agree with Noah Smith that the Democrats should triangulate a bit on immigration. Like, where Trump is really unpopular is when it comes to the economy and when it comes to tariffs and foreign policy. People still, I guess, overall want a stronger border, etc. I agree with a stronger border, but actually sending people to gulags, innocent people, is just evil as. And what we saw today as well with Bukele, and like he just admires dictators, and Bukele and them just mocking the Supreme Court, even though it was a 9-0 decision to return that innocent guy who was never a gang member. So Pisco, you were absolutely correct.
I appreciate that.
These people like are genuinely evil as, and yeah, I seriously think Trump is a fascist, and I made a video about how there's also a lot of like weird, funny similarities with Maoism and like the Khmer Rouge, like the kind of like the cult of sacrifice aspect to it. After the tariffs, when they had all these guys going, "Oh, you should embrace poverty for the fucking leader" and everything. Like it's getting really scary.
What'd you think of that?
Yeah. Oh, it's just mental, right? Like I can't believe all these guys who 3-4 months ago they were going like Biden has delivered the highest grocery prices in history, all this stuff, and then suddenly they're like literally embrace poverty for the dear leader. Like that's what they're doing now. It's a full Mao's death cult. And it's just scary. It's literally so scary now.
I appreciate you saying that. I think that there's some similarities in our views with respect to Ukraine, and maybe some with respect to us wanting like more liberal institutions and domestic policies being a particular way. So I appreciate you saying that. I think that like in general, I get more upset when people who I see kind of on the left or in the center take a kind of sympathetic view to Trump and to Elon. So that maybe explains some of the aggression on that.
I get that now because like I get that because what I was going to say is like, I've tended to like really like Bill Maher and everything. And I saw his thing the other day where he was like, I went and met with Trump and it was really nice to me and everything. And I was looking at him and I was like, come on, man. It's like at this point, it's full blown evil, right? So I understand your thing. I think I had basically deceived myself. I think I was just basically coping so hard because I've always been like the most pro-American guy ever. I really love the American alliance with Australia and everything. and just having to cope with it's all dead, it's all dead, it's all gone. Like it's a hard thing
Well,
for me to cope
Drew,
with.
it's really hard for me too. It's really hard for me too because I was a big AUKUS defender for the longest
Me
time.
too.
Yeah, and I actually think it's.
Dude,
Go ahead.
I was the biggest AUKUS defender, and it's dead now. Like the whole thing's dead. And I think the first 2-3 weeks, I was just trying to cope. Like, oh, maybe he won't be as bad on Ukraine, and I was trying to see silver line. It's just dead. It's just dead. So that's the saddest part.
So thank you for saying that. I appreciate that, and I'm pretty sure that we can still do discourse. I go hard in the paint, and I can go be really aggro and stuff, but I don't take it personally. And it sounds like you don't hold a grudge either.
I'm the same.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm the same. And look, I don't really hold the grudge. So I'm actually glad that we can talk now. We probably actually see eye to eye on like almost every subject right now.
On some stuff, because my first question for you is going to be like, what's your plan to vote for Anthony Albanese? Are you going to pre-vote? Are you going to go? Yeah, that's right. That's right, motherfucker. Yes. Why not?
I'm certainly not voting for the Liberals. I'm certainly not voting for anyone right wing. I'm going to think about maybe giving my vote to a minor party, probably preferencing like Labor over. It's hard because there's a lot of incompetence in Australian politics. There's a lot of incompetence in Australian politics. Like, for example, we have at the moment, like there were statistics in January that housing demand was double supply. We've had like a really, really record migration wave. And both Peter Dutton and Albanese have come out on the hustings this week, and they both said that their plan is to try and increase house prices further. And we literally have, at this point in time, the Australian housing market relative to GDP is actually much higher to the Japanese much higher than where the Japanese housing market was relative to their GDP when they had the massive Japanese housing bubble in the 80s that led to like the massive meltdown of the Japanese economy. So unfortunately, I think there's a lot of incompetence in Australian politics. I really don't feel represented by either side, unfortunately. That said, though, I would never vote for Peter Dutton ever.
Hell yeah. So you won't vote for Peter Dutton, but who's left, man? I mean, come on. You should...
Look.
Are you in Queensland?
I will.
Are you in New South Wales?
Yeah, I'm in Queensland.
Oh, yeah.
I'm in Queensland, and I'll probably vote for my local Labor candidate. That said, I'm not going to necessarily be that happy about it because I'm very upset with like how the Labor Party has been governing the past 3 years. I just think they've been pretty weak, and I just think that they're, and they hate me. A lot of these guys in the Labor Party.
Yeah,
why
do they hate you? Can you explain that?
Look, it's a long-term thing, but essentially, I started out in Australian politics and as an activist, really, really hard against the Chinese Communist Party. Because I held like a pro-Hong Kong rally at my university, and there were like 200, 300 pro-Chinese nationalists who came out and tried to surround us and bash us up and everything. So like, I immediately was like, seen as somebody who was like a China basher because I was like such a strong protest against the Chinese government. And like a lot of people on the left just immediately typecast you as right wing if that's the case. And like, look, I'm not, my attitude to China is so much different to sort of the MAGA attitude on China because like,
yeah, that's interesting because can I just pause real quick? So it's interesting to find where you're at because vis-a-vis tariffs, one of the arguments is that Trump is taking the ultimate China skeptical approach. Now I'm a little skeptical of that, but so what's your thoughts on that? Because I think you're anti-tariff. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that's the thing, right? And I actually wrote something on Substack about this, and it's a very hard thing for me, right? It's almost like I feel like I was the dog chasing cars for years, and suddenly you get the car and you don't know what to do with it. So for so many years, I advocated an approach that was basically boycott, divestment, sanctions on China because of the atrocities that were taking place against the Uyghurs, the Tibetans, the Hong Kongers. But obviously, that's an approach that's going towards, that's an approach rooted in, human rights and morality, etc. Whereas Trump doesn't give a fuck about any of that. He doesn't care about the Tibetans. He doesn't care about the Hong Kongers or the Uyghurs. There's literally, and at the exact same time as well, 1 month ago, he was talking about selling out. He was talking about selling out Taiwan 1 month ago. He was talking about a grand deal with China. He was talking about cutting U.S. military defense spending in half, etc. And so, look, I never trust Trump's motivations, and also just the way he's done it is also stupid because, like, my approach would have been tariffs on strategic sectors. Like, so for example, like tariffs and sanctions on really strategic sectors. So for example, like semiconductor manufacturing, the chips. What Biden did with chips when it came to China, I think is the right approach. What Trump has done is he's just literally put a tariff on every single product, and then he's now had to backflip because he's now having to exempt, phones and all these high-end manufactured goods, etc. So he's exempting all electronics now, and then it just becomes a joke, right? Because what he's doing then is he's exempting all electronics from the tariffs, and so all that they're going to try and bring back from China, I guess, is like really low end manufacturing, which doesn't even make sense from an American rebuilding manufacturing perspective. So see, my approach to China and trade and strategy is very much similar to the Biden administration's approach, the Chip Acts, all that sort of stuff. Definitely nothing to do with like what Trump is doing. I think it's actually just really stupid. The way he's done it is a disaster because it doesn't even make sense in terms of confronting the Chinese Communist Party. It doesn't even make sense because he's also tariffed every single American ally in our region. Yeah,
including
and
Australia,
so it's just a disaster. Like,
which is weird.
Yeah, including Australia, which is crazy. And like, also like, I remember reading a quote from a general, and essentially they were saying like to push Vietnam into the camp of China. I mean, I guess a lot of people don't realize this because obviously there was the Vietnam War, which is a massive event in American history, etc. But in recent decades, Vietnam has become a lot closer with America, and they were effectively a de facto kind of US. They were almost like a de facto US ally when it came to confronting the Chinese Communist Party because the Vietnamese communists are nationalists, and Vietnam has like 2,000 years of like nationalist conflict with China. So I've read a quote by a general who essentially said, like, to push Vietnam into the camp of China by doing things like this, it's essentially the same as China taking out an aircraft carrier group, like an aircraft carrier strike group. It's a disaster. In terms of strategy, it is like literally, it's like China sunk an American aircraft carrier strike group. And so just in terms of everything he's done, it's a disaster. I still believe, like, in being really strong and strategic when it comes to confronting the Chinese Communist Party, because like here's one thing, right, Pisco? Like, a lot of people, I've seen people go like, oh, Trump's so insane. Now we look to China for a commitment to upholding free trade around the world. Well, China put like $100 billion in sanctions on Australian trade goods like 3 years ago because the previous Australian government called for an independent investigation into COVID. So the Chinese government is really happy to to weaponize trade. They've weaponized trade against Lithuania. They removed their most favored trading nation status, I think, in Europe because the Lithuanian government was saying stuff that was pro-Taiwan. They put $100 billion in sanctions on Australia, essentially, put massive economic sanctions on Australia. So look, these guys, I still don't think they should ever be trusted, the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping, but the insane chaos of what Trump's doing, there's no strategy. He's damaged the entire American alliance system. He's fucking over Europe, and really the only way that America could actually succeed in confronting the Chinese Communist Party and defending Taiwan is if they have Europe on their side, and at the same time they're just destroying the alliance with Europe. So it just doesn't work out. It doesn't work out.
Totally agree on that. Can I ask you a little bit more, because I'm curious about your take on some of this Australia stuff, and we can move off of that. But Peter Dutton, you say never Peter. You have some problems as you laid out with the Labour Party of Australia, but talk a little bit more about why you're disenchanted with Peter Dutton.
Oh, I mean, like, there's so many reasons to be disenchanted with Peter Dutton. One thing in particular, he has made a show and dance of look, my reasons for being disenchanted with Dutton will not necessarily be dovetailed correctly. It won't necessarily dovetail neatly with a progressive reason for being disenchanted with Dutton. But I'm frustrated because essentially what happened at the last Australian election is that there were about 4 or 5 seats which had very large population of Chinese Australians, and those 4 or 5 seats flipped really hard against the Liberal Party at the last election because the Liberal Party was perceived to be anti-China, and the Chinese government ran a WeChat campaign in these seats as well. They put, legitimately like a, disinformation propaganda campaign. And this is like, I'm not even being conspiratorial. Like, the Australian public broadcaster ABC News has reported on the fact that there are really widespread disinformation and propaganda campaigns on WeChat. So essentially the Chinese government, they put $100 billion in sanctions on Australian goods. At the same time, they put a lot of pressure on the Australian government diplomatically, politically, and essentially it seems like they ran like a WeChat campaign where they put a lot of pressure, and they were basically the message was Australia's relationship with China will never improve until you get rid of the Liberal government. And both the Australian Labor Party and the Australian Liberal Party took the lesson from that election, the fact that 4 or 5 seats swung based on that reason. And in the end, the Australian Labor Party has a 1-seat majority. And so the Australian Labor Party and the Liberal Party took the lesson that if any party that goes really hard on China is perceived to be really hard on China, and the funny thing is, I don't even think of the Liberal Party under Scott Morrison as having had a really good approach to China, because they were clumsy. They didn't actually, they weren't building up Australian military spending. They were clumsy because they would speak really loudly. But you know that the funny, you know that quote where it's like, "Speak softly, carry a big stick." And Kevin Rudd said this. He said the
Teddy Roosevelt quote.
the Liberal
yes.
Party. Yeah, exactly. And Kevin, yeah, Teddy Roosevelt quote. And is my video?
Yeah, it
fucked
is.
up?
Yeah.
There's that Teddy Roosevelt quote, speak softly, carry a big stick. And Kevin Rudd, the now Australian ambassador to US, and he wrote a PhD on Xi Jinping thought and everything. He's a really acclaimed sinologist, and he basically said, listen, the Liberal Party's approach is to speak really loudly and carry no stick, and that's unfortunate, So it's the Liberal Party didn't even have a good strategy on China anyway, but essentially every single person in Australian politics took the lesson: you can't be tough on China. Otherwise, you will lose. Am I back now?
Yeah, I'm back. I'm back. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a quick question? So,
and what I
good.
What I was going to say, linking this all back, Peter Dutton has now actually come out and he's actually competing with Labor to try say, I'm pro-China. He's been attending events with, the Chinese consulates and Chinese embassy and stuff like that. He literally has fronted the media saying he's pro-China, all this stuff. And at the exact same time as well, like he's also been pictured like at like these very closed off functions where he's talking to these mega donors that that come from China, and he's basically saying like, we're going to introduce visa categories to allow people to come in if they purchase a visa for like millions of dollars and stuff like that. So like I'm very disenchanted with Dutton on foreign policy.
Check your mic input
and
real
then
quick.
I'm also, is it okay now?
It's audible. So I was going to ask you. So like,
is it okay now?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay.
Okay. So I was going to ask you, like, there's a little bit of an echo though. Just be careful. Hang on, testing, 1 2 3 1 2 3. Okay, that's better. That is not a typical reason people give for not liking Peter Dutton. So you're right about that. Why is it that like?
And also,
I just want to finish.
I was also going to say as well, like, I was also going to say, like, I think he's got a bad approach to housing. I think he's got a bad approach on migration. I think he's not going to. He wouldn't address the massive housing bubble that we have in Australia because he literally came out yesterday. I think it was literally yesterday, and he said He said his policy was to increase house prices even further, even though our housing bubble is now, in comparative terms, larger than the Japanese asset price bubble in the 80s, which led to the meltdown of the Japanese economy over like 2 decades. So he's pretty disastrous on economics. He's pretty disastrous on foreign policy. And also, he's got a track record of, illiberalism, etc. So I'm not a fan of him. That said, I'm not a fan of Albo either, even though I'll likely vote for my local Labor candidate.
Interesting. I was going to ask you, you're kind of known for being incredibly emphasizing of foreign policy conflicts. For example, you just said China, right?
Yeah.
Another one, Ukraine. Another one, Israel.
Yeah.
So why is it that these foreign conflicts have captured your interest and like made it like the main thing? So for example, for me, the most important thing for me right now is government corruption domestically. And I think that in order for us to have the right foreign policy, we need to have like no more corruption in America and no more authoritarianism in America. And so for me, foreign policy is almost an afterthought. Now I happen to think Democrats are way better on foreign policy than Republicans, but like, why is foreign policy so important to you?
Yeah, look, I understand that, and I know that and I also know that like most, that's the same with most people actually. Most people just don't even really consider foreign policy when they're voting. Listen, for me, it's very important because it's always been my number one issue. It's always been my passion and my main interest, because I don't just see things in terms of like, Australian domestic politics. I try and take a more global approach. I really care about, the survival of liberalism and individual freedom across the entire world. That's why I care about what's happening in America. That's why I talk about it so much. That's why I talk as well a lot about Ukraine and Europe. And I think right now we're in a really dangerous time and a really scary place where really we are going back to like the 1930s type thing. Globalization's going into reverse. We're going to now see the same sorts of things that we saw with trade in the 1930s with, trade just collapsing everywhere. It might lead to a global depression. The extremists on both the far left and the far right are going to use that to take power. And there is just like there's a really strong, like, resurgent coalition of illiberal authoritarian states: China, North Korea, Iran, and Russia. They're working together, and their goal is to subvert domestic politics in America, to subvert domestic politics in Australia, all around. Like, they run these disinformation campaigns, they run these propaganda campaigns, using online influence. And I genuinely think like Russiagate was real, and it's a huge fucking thing in America. Like, I genuinely think Trump and the people around his orbit have been somehow captured. Whether it's whether it's unwittingly through propaganda or actually genuinely captured. Like these people have subverted domestic politics in the West. They're trying to encourage extremism in the West. They're trying to encourage, illiberal authoritarian movements in Europe, in America, in Australia. They're also pushing really, really hard. So, you've literally got North Korean and Chinese troops now in Ukraine fighting. I came back from Ukraine last month. I filmed at the front lines. I saw the aftermath of an apartment complex that had been bombed by Russia with a ballistic missile, and then they used cluster munitions as a double tap strike to hit the first responders. And I was on the scene about 40 hours after it happened. It was 2 days after Trump.
Oh, right, you were there. Yeah, you were there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, two days after Trump suspended aid and intelligence sharing to Ukraine, they bombed this place in Dobropilya in the Donbass. They hit it with a ballistic missile, and then they used cluster munitions on the first responders. And I was there 40 hours after it happened. You could still see the smoke in the air, toxic chemicals in the air, and I saw dozens and dozens, maybe more than 100 incinerated apartments, and I just knew that dozens and dozens of people had been killed. There was still there were still bloody medical gloves on the ground and everything. I saw this with my own eyes. This is what Russia's doing. This is what they're doing with the complicity of Trump now, and it's also with the complicity of China, because they have never tried to pressure Russia to stop this. They signed that agreement right before the invasion, where Xi Jinping and Putin talked about a no limits friendship agreement. At the exact same time that this happened, at the exact same time when I was still in Ukraine, China was sending Navy military ships to circumnavigate Australia, and they were simulating what they would do in terms of actually blockading Australia. They were doing live naval fire exercises in the Tasman Sea, which is between New Zealand and Australia. They were doing literally live fire exercises, simulating what they would do to blockade Australia. They sent research ships that had the capacity to cut submarine cables, and they had them going over submarine cable lines in Australia. And so I see all of this, and it's all unified. It's all connected. China, Russia, Iran, they're pushing massive propaganda narratives. They're pushing extremism in the West, encouraging people on the far right and the far left. And it's domestically, they're killing us. And then they're also pushing when it comes to actually international scene, starting these conflicts. Iran pushed October 7 to happen. There's now, the Middle East has been on fire for the past 2 years, and Russia has obviously put Eastern Europe, has taken Eastern Europe back decades in terms of, security. So we're in a scary place. And at the exact same time, China has been carrying out rehearsals of, for blockading Taiwan. They were doing that 2 weeks ago, and they were rehearsing blockading Australia 4 weeks ago when I was just in Ukraine. So all this stuff is interconnected. And for me, I'm very passionate about this stuff.
Yeah.
Also, even just my personal experiences as well. Like my personal experiences are pretty insane. Like I had the Australian Federal Police call me into their offices in August 2023, and they basically alerted me that in the course of a foreign interference investigation, they'd intercepted a genuine plot to find my address and harm me in Australia, buy assets in Australia, and they didn't confirm.
Like friendly Geordies.
But we ultimately, yeah, basically, kind of, yeah. I think with friendly Geordies, what happened was, and I'm not kidding here. I think with friendly Geordies, and he probably can't say this because he'll get in trouble, but I'm pretty sure it was the Alameddine crime family in New South Wales.
Oh, yeah?
I think it was like a Lebanese gang in West Sydney or something like that, and they're big, yeah.
Okay,
I think it was because he videos from them.
I'm going to push you a little bit because I have some agreement with you with respect to the threat of countries like Russia, China, certainly Iran, and their influence in America. I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think that it's dangerous, and I think that we have seen part of our security state apparatus be captured, at least with Russian narratives, if not with Russian sympathizers. If anything, I think it's a disgrace to our country, and it's a threat to the West. That said, I have to tell you, you're a staunch supporter of Israel. I was a strong Biden supporter. Biden supported, Israel's war. However, I want to finish my thought. I have to tell you, I do not appreciate the fact that there is a great deal of money from either Israel supporters or from Israel itself pushing for MAGA Republican candidates in my country. I find that incredibly bad. I think it's distasteful. I think it's wrong. I think that Bibi Netanyahu is a disgrace. I have to tell you, I'm becoming more and more skeptical of in this constellation of actors, I'm skeptical of Israel's influence here, and I'm skeptical. I think that they're trying to lead us to a war with Iran. That's what my gut is telling me, is that they're egging the administration on for at least more hostile activities with Iran. I do not want a war with Iran, and so I'm skeptical of any organization that is pushing for more MAGA degeneracy in my country. And it seems like the Israeli state, led by Bibi Netanyahu, is pushing for more MAGA authoritarianism. They're supporting anti-free speech measures in my country, deporting people on the basis of their First Amendment protected activities. And so I'm incredibly skeptical of that influence. And more, I think I'm waking up to the notion that this is a toxic influence on our domestic affairs. You're very pro-Israel, so reconcile that.
Let me say, I agree with you on Netanyahu. I've always been opposed to Netanyahu. I don't like Netanyahu. I don't like the far-right government in Israel. I don't like Ben Gvir and Smotrich, etc. When you say that I'm a big defender of Israel, my stance is simply that I oppose what is a very genocidal campaign by Hamas and anti-Zionists to destroy Israel. So it's almost like my position is like anti-Zionist, like I'm against the anti-Zionists who want to destroy a country of 7 million people and commit genocide against Israeli Jews. That's my position, right? I'm not completely uncritical of the Israeli state. I've criticized their actions. I've criticized their aggression when it comes to the new government in Syria. I think they're right to take out the chemical weapons, but I think that they should have given diplomacy a chance rather than, go straight for war. I'm very critical of, his relations with Trump, how they've pushed, really far right MAGA guys in America. When it comes to these deportations, I think if somebody has explicitly supported Hamas and terrorism, that's one thing. And I would support in that scenario, somebody being deported. But what Trump is obviously doing is he's just targeting random people who've randomly gone to Palestine demonstrations. I don't support that. So I think there needs to be a distinction between people who have explicitly supported violence and explicitly supported terrorist actions. And look, my stance at the end of the day is it's like an anti-Zionist stance, right? Like I think Israel should exist as a country. I'm against people who want to destroy it. And unfortunately, that is genuinely a massive part of the sort of anti-Zionist online Palestine movement. There are millions of people that agree with this stuff. You see every day, you've got people who'll put up. There was that post the other day by that Up Lovely guy who's got hundreds of thousands of followers, and he's posting about how you should have unremitting hostility towards any Israeli civilian you ever meet, no matter what the context is. If anybody's Israeli, you should just hate them straight up. And this had tens of thousands of likes and stuff like that. And then there was somebody who responded to that, and they said every single Israeli should be dissected and beheaded live on TV, and it got 10,000 likes. That's the stuff that I'm opposed to, because it is explicit genocidal stuff against Jewish people. I'm against the anti-Zionist Hamas Iran Islamist coalition, right? I'm very critical.
Would you consider Mehdi Hassan to be a part of that coalition? Or you still have the hate boner for him?
No. Look. I still hate Mehdi Hassan because I think he has explicitly over and over and over again made excuses for atrocities, etc. That said, I don't think he's an actual Hamas guy or whatever. I think he has taken money from Qatar, and I think he's got a very biased view of the conflict, and I would strongly disagree with him on a lot of issues. But I'm not saying he's a terrorist or whatever. I don't know. I still don't like him. I still dislike him, right? I've got a different political perspective on from him. Mm-hmm. Because, for example, here's a good example, right? He covered the Ukraine conflict very well. He knew just how bad Russia had acted. He knew that tens of thousands of people been killed by Russia, and he went out onto television in America, and he was saying, "Oh well, Israel's killed more people than Russia's killed, etc." And he full well knows that nobody knows the true count of civilians who've been killed in Ukraine, because most of the people who were killed were behind Russian lines, and there's no way to understand the mass graves in Mariupol, etc. We don't have a full perspective of that. And Mehdi Hassan knows that, and he still went onto TV in America, and he was sort of weaponizing that. I think it was the Piers Morgan show where he weaponizes that, and he basically was weaponizing the fact that Ukraine doesn't have a fully accurate picture of civilian casualties to try attack Israel. And listen, I think that's really disingenuous. I think that's a terrible thing to do. So I still disagree with Mehdi Hassan. I still think when it comes to topics like Islamism and stuff like that, he's quite biased. That said, I'm not going to say he's a full Hamas guy or whatever.
Interesting. Do you have any questions or thoughts about towards me, or do you have any questions?
Look, yeah, no, I'm interested. What do you think when it comes to, this question of should moderates and sort of centrists and progressive people compromise a bit when it comes to border security, compromise a bit when it comes to immigration and cultural assimilation and these sorts of things to try and push back the far right in Europe and also in America?
Yeah, I think it's a really excellent question, especially in the context of what really, at least in America, has been a aggressively antagonistic view towards the status quo when it comes to immigration. If you're asking me at bottom, do I think that immigration in the American context from Central and South America represents an existential threat to this country? The answer is flatly no. I don't believe it.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah.
I agree with you there. I don't agree with the Steve Miller rhetoric. Obviously, when he talks, it's like an invasion. America's being destroyed. That's obviously like he uses really extremist fascist rhetoric. I still think though, like if you look at like say a country like Denmark, like the liberals over there, the progressive side, have been a lot stronger on border security, and that seems to have blunted a lot of the far right's advantage.
Yeah, so as an electoral strategy, and listen, I think it's just good. It's good policy for us to secure the border. I think that is fine. I don't support illegal measures to do so. So I think a lot of the ways in which Donald Trump has stopped a bunch of illegal crossings is through illegal means. For example, shutting down asylum, threatening people with arbitrary detention, and throwing them to a gulag in El Salvador, and using kind of illegal means to threaten people. So I think that I don't support those illegal actions. I think Congress needs to address it more holistically. But in general, I'm in favor of spending money on more border patrol agents, on spending money to enhance the amount of processing that occurs in this country. And so I think there are grand bargains that we can have across the aisle. Here's what it's not because I think that more immigration to this country necessarily would be a bad thing, because ultimately I think if people do it the right way, and if we have legal immigration, it's helpful to have immigration, especially in this situation where we have record unemployment. People are looking to employ individuals, and so I don't think it's going to be that harmful. There's short-term inadequacies, short-term problems caused by quote-unquote mass migration or big bouts of immigration, but those can be, I think, solved, and in the long term don't pose an existential risk, and certainly not even to like the voting patterns. If you look at like Hispanics voting, they're in greater numbers for Republicans than ever before. And so I think this notion that that this is just an importation for purposes of electoral politics is untrue. But just putting that to, I think there are absolutely grand bargains that we can get to, but I think Democrats need to find their balls when it comes to messaging on immigration and target Trump's attack on rights with respect to immigration. And right now, Trump
I agree with you there. The Gulag stuff is.
He's underwater in immigration. It's slight. It's like 1 or 2 points. But for the first time in a while, if you ask Americans in general, they don't agree with his policies. And that's because they see that something's wrong here. And I don't think we need to embrace the kind of maximalist Trump version of immigration.
I agree with you. I agree with you there. And you saw even Joe Rogan was like, what the f*** are you doing with that gay Venezuelan barber guy sent to a gulag? Like, even Joe Rogan was saying that. So I think people like want a stronger border in America. That's what it seems to be the case. That seems to be the case when it comes to polling. But I don't think people want the insane gulag policy, which is actually scary as f***. Like, the Bukele shit is scary as f***.
Yeah, and I think that what you can tell now is this economic... So the border illegal crossings are down significantly, hugely, right? And has the economic malaise of the country improved? No. People are more disheartened about the economy than ever before. So the truth is, what happens is they make this scapegoat of immigrants are the cause of all your economic concerns, immigrants are the cause, and all of a sudden we have massive decreases in the amount of border crossings, and the truth is the economic malaise continues. And it's not because we're looking for more jobs, because unemployment is lower than it's ever been. So it's not this issue of too many workers looking for too few jobs. And so ultimately, to me, it's a massive fear campaign. And now Trump is mismanaging the economic situation. And I think it's proving what's occurring here is they're trying to blame immigrants for everyone's problems. And that's what I always suspected. And even though we can acknowledge there are real problems and maybe we can position ourselves smarter, I think it makes me more interested in not just becoming Republicans when it comes to immigration and proposing actually like some kind of solution that isn't just ground out into hating immigrants all the time.
No, I agree with you there. And the Gulag policy is insane. And seeing Bukele today in the White House was actually scary as
Yeah.
when Trump was literally saying deport American citizens to a gulag.
Yeah.
That's just insane. That's insane. You know what, Pisco, though? I think he's kneecapped his presidency with the Liberation Day. I can't see him turning it around now.
Well, I think
What do you think?
I think he could, but I think it's a massive risk. The fact that he's pursuing the policy, the backflips, he could have really turned this country into a dictatorship if he were smarter about it. He could have.
I think so.
And I think the one of the biggest risks to his presidency and for his authoritarian maneuvers is economic mismanagement. And I think that right now he's just very clearly mismanaging the situation. Yeah.
That's the crazy thing, because I think you're completely right. If he had avoided these insane, like American Juche style economic decisions, he probably could have consolidated enough power. If he had built to like a 60% approval rating or something like that, it would have genuinely, like, he could have probably done anything he wanted, because he's already ignoring the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
But I think probably the most likely thing, just from my perspective, is if he's fucking the economy so badly, at some point, even half the Republican, I know, like, probably may sit, what percentage of the Republican Party do you think is MAGA-fied? Like, if the Republican vote, like,
the
60,
voter,
70% maybe?
at least, 60, 70, if not 80. I mean, his approval rating, I wouldn't call 90% MAGA-fied, but he enjoys like 95 support. So it's widespread support. MAGAification, I would say 60 to 70 to 80%.
Yeah. Because I think the path to trying to defeat him is, like, you have to cleave off like maybe 30% or something like that of his electoral coalition in 2024.
It's not.
Do you think it's possible with the economic insanity?
Oh, yeah, it's possible to win in 2028. One is I think that he actually will have challenges being on the ballot. And
I think also, you're actually expecting he's gonna. You expect he's gonna do the third.
He's gonna try. Yeah,
really?
I think he'll try. Yeah. And if he doesn't, it'll be because he's like too old and doesn't want to. But like, I think right now he's planning for it. I do. Now I think he'll have trouble getting on the ballot. But either way, I do think it's these are winnable. All this is winnable, and it's not. We're never going to shave off 30%. It's going to be about 2, 3, 4%, that kind of thing. I wish that 30% would be defecting. That was kind of like the hope with, going the Liz Cheney kind of Adam Kinzinger route, but it seems like the Republicans are just they don't see him as a big deal, and they won't until they hurt, and they'll hurt hopefully.
Let's go
ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, like, surely it will be the tariffs that do that, though, because like I was the YouTube influencer Kraut.
Does he lift weights?
No, but look, he's a liberal.
That Canute.
He's a liberal. He's a liberal guy in Austria, and he makes video essays and stuff. And he was saying, like, he can't see any hope whatsoever that anybody will defect from the sort of MAGA like cult. And I was saying to him, though, like, at the same time, they've never had to be economically punched in the face like this before, right? So I don't know, like, it's sad. I wish all this other insane shit he's done would change people's minds, but maybe just literally people having their 401ks affected, people having their businesses affected, maybe that will be the thing that does it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that not everyone who voted for Trump is a member of the MAGA coalition. So I think there are generally people. Yeah. So for example, I get into it a lot with Cenk Uygur, and he says he has now strawmanned our criticism of his position that the right-wing populist base is going to be turning on Trump if he does anything anti-populist. Oh, he's turned that position into no one who supported Trump will ever defect. That's not my position. That's not our position. We think that there are people, even the crypto people, who are fair weather friends, who are either charmed or they're fair weather friends, or they're just doing it because they had bad vibes about the economy, who absolutely can turn on.
I saw Aiden Ross having a meltdown the other day because his crypto was down and his stocks were down, and he said, like, I've lost 20% of my net worth.
Yeah.
I think there's a chance that if he fucks up. I don't know. What is Cenk Uygur's current position? What is he actually doing now?
Dude, if I know. I mean, he kind of is. I tried to reach out today via Twitter. I think he's too dug in. He's taken the position that the right-wing populist base is like worth courting, is worth kind of appealing to.
I don't think it.
And
it's a cult around Trump. No one can take them off. I think no Democrat can ever peel off a Trump MAGA cultist like that.
I view the right-wing populist base. I take that to mean the ideologically committed right-wing populist base who So that's what I think of as the right-wing populist base, and I just don't see them as being concerned with the things that Cenk thinks that they're concerned with, and so I just think that the strategy is doomed for failure, and he's just taking L after L after L, but he's dug in because he's burned actually a lot of bridges on this notion and this criticism of it, and so I don't know what it would take to convince him otherwise. And at this point, he's citing, for example, the Rogan comments that you cited as evidence for his point, but obviously he's changing what his point is. His point was that exactly.
Rogan still supports Trump. That's the thing. Like he might have said that one policy is bad, but he still supports Trump at the end of the day.
But also he's not the MAGA cultist, right? He is like the new Trump voter. He's kind of like the new cultural,
like he's been voted.
Exactly.
Like, charmed as you said.
But he is not in the same level of drinking the Kool-Aid as what I take to be the right-wing populist space, which again are the more ideologically committed MAGA people. I don't really see a possibility for us to convincingly or consistently pull the right-wing populist base. I think more than anything, we should be appealing to moderates, centrists, fair weather Republicans, and really our own Democrats to pull the numbers here.
Has Cenk condemned stuff like the Bukele gulags? Has he condemned stuff like the tariffs? Like, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, he has.
Right. So what part of Trump's program does he still support?
I don't know that he supports any of Trump's program. Yeah, so when I hear him talk, he'll say things like, well, they said they were going to cut military spending. And I go back to all my tweets I have at him and be like, this is how many times we told you he's not going to cut military spending. And so there are some times where...
Here's the thing as well. If Trump ends up cutting defense spending, and who even knows what he's going to do? Because I saw the other day he was saying, "Oh, we're going to take it up to $1 trillion." Like he changes his mind every day, apparently. But if he were to cut defense spending, it's not going to be for progressive reasons. Like it's going to be because he's got. It's because he's going to be like sitting in the scenario where he actually cuts military defense spending. What happens in that scenario is he sits down with Putin and Xi Jinping for like a Yalta 2.0 conference and like literally divides up the world into spheres of influence. And it would just be disaster. Like in that world, he would probably be saying to these guys, listen, you let us take Canada and Greenland and we'll let you take Taiwan and Ukraine.
Yeah,
but that's what I think.
Even in that scenario, I agree with you.
Where Trump cuts defense in it.
Yeah. Even in that scenario, I think he's unlikely to do it just because any dictator, right? Or any would-be dictator, any want-to-be autocrat, he doesn't want to make the military people angry. He doesn't want to make the defense contractors angry. He needs them on his side, right? No one rules alone. That's not true. Even a king, right? A king doesn't rule alone. And so it's never going to happen. He has no impetus to cut it. And think about it. Elon Musk is a defense contractor. These people are enmeshed and some of them are big neocons. And certainly like they're not going to cut it. They're just not.
Here's the other thing though. Like I see your point there, but at the same time though, I would have thought that if he really was actually, because you know how there's like kind of like this left-wing perspective where it's like, you know, there's like a kind of military-industrial complex that has like, you know, taken hold of the state and everything. Like, if that were the case, they wouldn't have allowed Trump to do what he's done with completely throwing Europe under the bus, I would think, because he's destroyed as well, like, all of America's future military-industrial contracts with Europe, because nobody's going to want to buy from them anymore ever again. Because he said,
I don't just cut off people. I don't think they agree with it. I think that Trump's tariffs are motivated by two things. One is his long-standing ideological support of them. This is like a long-standing belief of his, this whole trade deficit thing, and you can go back. So I think that there is genuinely ideological belief by Trump in it, but also the corruption of having people come to him for the exemption stuff. So I think it's kind of the dual purpose. So I don't think that his insiders like it. Like, for example, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, I don't think he likes them. I don't know that his defense people like it, but they're stuck in it and they're sold on him. And so what they're doing, they're trying to make sure that they're sort of positioning themselves vis-a-vis Trump in a way that's positive, but I don't think that they're as ideologically committed to Europe's progress or to America's standing in that regard. I think they're much more committed to American domestic military production and their internal jockeying for power, and so they're willing to sacrifice what were core beliefs of American neoconservatism in exchange for the kind of core aspects of power politics and also their defense industry.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there. I don't know. It's funny, right? Because like there's one school of thought about this whole recent tariff debacle and the economic fallout that has taken place. there's like that sort of long history on more the populist and maybe far left, like definitely the sort of Jeremy Corbyn types, where they actually have kind of advocated in the past for a sort of deglobalization on leftist lines because they see like international capital as colluding to keep out left-wing governments and all that stuff. In a way, I think like the funny thing is, and this is why I made my MAGA Maoist.
I'm not a Corbynite, by the way. I just want to be clear. I'm not a Corbynite.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying, like, it's just funny though because like I mean, I guess maybe this is the position that like Cenk Uyghur is trying to come to. Like, there's this kind of like wing of the far left where they're like, they should be happy about what Trump's doing because in a way he's actually like fulfilling all their fantasies about destroying like neoliberalism and global capitalism and all this stuff. Like that's where we're at now, kind of thing.
Kind of, but like, I get it.
Like, what's a good example, right? Like, a good example was I saw a video of like a year ago. Hassan Piker was saying free trade's disgusting, free trade's disastrous, and then now he's defending free trade. I'm like, dude, like you were saying a year ago that this was like from a left-wing perspective, we should dismantle this stuff.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
So I think that first of all, there are multiple aspects of neoliberalism, and there's one aspect of neoliberalism I think that he's maintaining, which is kind of the deregulation mentality in the United States, and that seems like very Reaganite. It seems very in a way, I guess it's
like destroying state capacity.
I say that, but he's interfering in the domestic market as well. So I guess in terms of he is kind of picking winners, and so maybe I take that back a little bit. He is deregulating though, but it's more for corruption. But yeah, the planned economy stuff is totally true. I want to give some credit to. I'm not inclined to do this, but I will give some credit to Hassan Piker and to Cenk Uyghur. I don't think their position is just ruin the economy with tariffs. I think that they would take a kind of Bernie Sanders-esque approach or even a Biden-esque approach. I think Biden was not a neoliberal. Biden represents a break from neoliberalism. As you kind of outlined in your initial your statement, the CHIPS Act, some of his domestic production goals, some of his tariffs on China, these were not neoliberal. He was really focusing on domestic labor, domestic production in ways that I think were a little bit slow, but they were a kind of break from neoliberalism. So I think liberalism is on the outs in many specific ways. But one thing that Trump is doing now that endangers it is he's kind of discrediting anti-free trade arguments. He's kind of discrediting Brexit. He's discrediting Brexit. He's discrediting the movement that some might have for like targeted tariffs. And he's making tariff be a really, really bad word again. And so that I think will actually not be welcome news to the Hassan Pikers and Cenk Uyghurs and Bernie Sanders of the world who want tariffs, but they just want it applied in a more targeted way. And by the way, I'm much more market oriented when it comes to trade in general, except for kind of domestic security type situations and the specific kind of Biden policies. But I'm much more skeptical of some of the the neoliberal critiques at times. But in general, I think that this is not good for the Cenk Uyghurs because I think he's doing a lot of damage to policies they might be in favor of.
Yeah, no, that's the funny thing, right? Like if Trump actually ends up crashing and burning over this particular stuff, in a way, it's almost like America dodges a massive bullet, right? Because he could have made himself dictator over this stuff. And also it would discredit a lot of this stuff for a long time, I hope. I don't know. Do you think in a scenario where Trump does go down in flames over all this stuff, do you think like how strong would the cult of personality still be? Like it still probably would be. I mean, like 35% of the American electorate is like fully Trumpified. I don't know. Like
they're Trumpified. So the Trumpified people are Trumpified. 30%, at least, it's definitely 30 to 35% of the whole country is Trumpified of the voting base, whatever. Right. Good.
Because that's what it seems, right? It seems like 35% of the country is like fully Trump cult, and then maybe like another 15% are like people who are willing to vote for Trump to advance their own. And I guess if you have to try and cleave off those people,
and
I don't know how you de-radicalize the MAGA base.
There's a good 44% of the country that despises Trump, and these people are always anti-Trump no matter what. And you've never really seen Trump's approval, even at this stage, get above like 6, 7, 8%. And the people who hate Trump, you could say there is a bit of an anti-Trump cult as well. I wouldn't call it a cult because I don't think that it doesn't meet the same framework, but they are just very, very much opposed to Trump in every way. It's a very particularly toxic situation because of how our system works, our party system works. Trump, even if he loses power, even if he's on a downward swing, he can take a lot of Republicans down with him. And so really, he's going to have to be incredibly unpopular for them to turn on him. And I want to say, I see Grip in the chat. I actually don't agree with Cenk on lowering defense spending. I do so as an internal critique in terms of his wanting Trump to enact some policies that he considers to be victories. There probably is some bloat and shit that we can cut, but in general, I think that the military is a good investment for America. But if you're someone who doesn't, if you're someone who thinks that America's military budget needs to be cut, if you're someone, for example, who wants to have targeted tariffs, then you should be even more against what Trump is doing, because Trump is not, he's going to be a gateway into greater defense spending, greater bloat, greater spending, greater inefficiencies. And again, like I said, the discrediting of tariffs as a tool of economic leverage.
That's true. It's really interesting. Where do you see things going for the next year, Pisco?
I think that the Democrats are primed in a position to take advantage of growing discontent and dissatisfaction with the way that Trump is handling the economy, and in general, sliding approval ratings that tend to happen of incumbents anyway after they've been elected. And so they're really in a strong position electorally if they can make it there. The problem is the rate of authoritarian power accumulation is concerning. There have been efforts and there's been some success in slowing him down on some areas. And this tariff thing is going to slow him down in some ways. But it's just about whether the country can buy itself enough time to get to the midterms, essentially. Once you get to the midterms, I think Democrats are in a good position to seize it and to do a good job. And at that point, once you have a branch of Congress, you can rest a little bit more easy. Not completely, because he's willing to do anything. But it's basically, can you outlast them? Can you buy enough time? Can you delay the authoritarian maneuvers of him and the Project 2025 goons that he has in place long enough to get to the election, have them run fairly, and win them, actually? It's not a foregone conclusion, any of that. I don't think that Trump is going to be successful ultimately in turning this country into Hungary, but it's going to be a danger, and even the fact that there is some decent chance that it could happen is a threat. But I think Democrats are in a good position to poise, but they're being fucking fucked over by their leadership and by, frankly, a lot of their institutionalist ways, which are all about like seniority, and they're all kind of like weirdo people who can't talk on podcasts, and they're all kind of like 90-year-olds, and so Democrats are not doing themselves any favors, but they have a rare opportunity.
Who do you think should be the nominee in 2028?
If I had to pick my preferred nominee at the moment, it would be either Chris Murphy or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That's where the energy is.
It's interesting,
and that's
it's interesting. There is a lot of there is a lot of energy with AOC. I just wonder if some of her like past really like I think some of her stuff, like where she was talking about helping illegal immigrants evade ICE and stuff like that, I'm worried like that would be weaponized really harshly against her.
Yeah, I would defend her every day on the fucking earth. Yeah, so for me, it's all about people with riz and energy and strength and fighters. And so I would be okay with her continuing to do her good work in the House. I would be okay with her taking Chuck Schumer's seat in the Senate. I think Schumer needs to go. I think Hakeem Jeffries needs to go. I think these people are not made for the moment. But essentially, I think that anyone with energy, with fight in them, is good. And frankly, I'm just going to put it out there. I think that I don't think Bernie Sanders should run. I think he's too old. But I do think that a Bernie Sanders AOC ticket, with the explicit understanding that AOC will fill in if shit hits the fan, I wouldn't have a problem. That would not be my least priority ticket. And it's not it really is not ideological. It really isn't. It's about resonance, riz, and authenticity. That's really what it's about, and it's not ideological.
For me, it looks like Bernie's actually already preparing her to run, and he's going to back her, and it'll be known as like Bernie's candidate.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I think that if Tim Walz is at the top of the ticket, I'd be fine with it. If AOC is at the top of the ticket, I'd be fine with it. I have no problem with that whatsoever. People I don't want to see at the top of the ticket: Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom. I would be okay with Josh Shapiro. I would be okay with Andy Beshear. I'd be okay with Pete Buttigieg. I think those people have energy. I think they have fight. And so I'm not committed 100% to the candidates I laid out. I think Chris Murphy's excellent, but I almost think that Chris Murphy would be a better Senate leader. But I just love Chris Murphy in general, so I would have no problem with him running.
He's been doing well lately.
What's that?
I've been liking his stuff lately.
Yeah.
He's doing pretty well.
Yeah, I think that he's been doing exceptionally well. People who I really would despise to be on the ticket are people like Stephen A. Smith, people like Andrew Cuomo, people who, you know, the Fetterman types, these kind of capitulators, these kind of like we're here to bring common sense back. Like those people, I think can get the fuck out.
Well, I actually, just from my perspective, it doesn't even look like they would even have any hope of winning the nomination right now because they can't match the energy. The funny thing, right, is like I still see myself as like a moderate, and I still see myself as like much more, you know, definitely not in the sort of AOC Bernie wing of the party, but I think like you just have to have a really strong sense of like fight right now.
Yeah.
Like whoever is the nominee has to be someone who's willing to like really, really go hard.
Well, 1 trillion%, Drew, and it's again, I stress, it's not ideological. Like I think Biden still, even despite his flaws, has been the best U.S. president in my lifetime. Joe Biden is not a socialist.
I agree. In terms of policy,
Yes.
in terms of policy, I agree. Yeah,
and I say this as somebody who supported Bernie Sanders in 2020 in the Democratic primary, supported Bernie Sanders in 2016, but I'm not known as a crazy left-wing guy because I'm not. I'm someone who I think I'm pretty left-wing, but you know, I'm a capitalist. I'm someone who takes a more kind of strong American posture position in terms of defense. I'm someone who definitely wants us to have footholds in Europe and wants us to be a presence and sort of embraces things like AUKUS, things like alliances with the UK, military alliances, nuclear submarine deals. I'm someone who, and those aren't necessarily things that a lot of people want. I'm not an interventionist for its own sake, but I would consider myself definitely someone who wants to be involved and engaged in the world. I definitely want to support Ukraine. I think we should be spending much more money on Ukraine. So this is I wouldn't put myself in the category of the most left-wing person you're going to find online. I'm certainly, by the way, an institutionalist when it comes to legal stuff and corruption. Those are not characteristic of someone who just wants to blow up the system. In many cases, I prefer the wonky solution and the clever solution as opposed to the solution that everyone's going to be on board. So maybe healthcare is an exception there. I might think that we might need to do single payer, but I'm open to a public option. I'm a reasonable person. I'm a pragmatist before I'm an ideologue. Always, I'm a pragmatist. But that said,
I think I agree with you on all that stuff.
Like if Pete Buttigieg is the most winningest candidate, the one who's strongest, I'm gonna back him. But if it's AOC and Pete Buttigieg have different views, right? Josh Shapiro, his vision of what America should be is going to be incredibly different than Bernie Sanders or AOC. It's about fight. It's about winning. It's about fighting corruption. It's about energy. And that's what I'm here for. And so people might be frustrated. Like, why is he always bringing up AOC? Why is he always bringing up Bernie? It's because that's where I see the fight. And every time I see a feckless moderate, it pisses me off. Anytime I see some asshole on is talking about how for example, Alyssa Slotkin, that speech after Trump's sucked. I don't want to talk about going back to Reaganism and this and that. No, I want energy. I want pure fight. And unfortunately, right now, or fortunately, it's in the progressive wing of the party, and they've got it, right? So, and it's even in the media. I'm going to finish this point. It's even in the media. Like, I got to say, Kyle Kalinske, Crystal Ball, these people, you might not agree on everything on policy, and I certainly don't necessarily agree with everything on policy, but they're at least speaking truth to power when it comes to domestic corruption and what's going on with the Trump administration in a way that like the mainstream media, New York Times, they're pulling their punches because they're scared. But I see a lot of like the progressive commentators coming to fight, and that fuels me with tackling fuel with energy. And so I want to see everyone embrace that. And I see Chris Murphy as a way to he's a nice balance because he's a more balanced guy. He's wonky. He's very wonky, but he also has that fight in him, and he has that realness in him, and it shows you. It proves that I'm not being ideological. I'm being pragmatic, and I'm being principled in terms of fight.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with you on a lot there, Pisco. The funny thing is like literally in January when you were like going aggro at me, like I literally was being a feckless moderate, and then the funny thing is like within 2 months he's managed to radicalize me into being like just full hardline anti-Trump. Because, like, look, at least at the end of the day, I'm able to change my mind, and I changed my mind based on his concrete actions, right? And like, I completely agree with you right now. Like, there's no path towards being like, oh, we'll just do Trumpism with like a little bit more moderate. Like, no, the whole thing has to be destroyed. Like,
Yeah.
it's just a disaster. It's a full-blown disaster. And they want to make America a third world country. Seriously.
They do.
That's what they want to do.
Yeah, and so I'm a demolition man when it comes to MAGA, and I want to elect and nominate the people who are most likely to destroy MAGA, take them out of power.
I agree with you there.
And so that's what I want. It's about power for me, and it's about exerting power and influence to get these people away from government.
Yeah, I just hope that AOC can moderate a bit because, like, she did small things like, for example, she took her pronouns out of her bio and stuff like that. Like, I think she needs to do stuff like that if she wants to make herself, like, fully electable by, like, 2028. I hope, but she's a smart politician. She's not like fully Jeremy Corbyn, right? Like, I think when it comes to those, when you see people on the socialist left, right, like, it's a continuum. You've got the Jeremy Corbyns who are just like clueless, and they're the type of guys who they're willing to like burn their career down on the sake of like trying to like be friends with Hezbollah and shit like that. And I don't think Bernie Sanders ever got to that level. Like, I think Bernie Sanders never really had crazy foreign policy views in that same way. AOC, I think she can moderate a bit more, but I don't think she's in the same level as, like I say, Jeremy Corbyn and stuff like that. I hope she can moderate a bit more because, look, I do admire her fight right now.
Yeah, no, I think that she's not Jeremy Corbyn. Like, I've never heard her, for example, I've heard Jeremy Corbyn be like very Russia apologetic and kind of,
exactly.
I've never heard AOC do that. I've never heard AOC, for all the criticism vis-a-vis Israel and Palestine, I've never heard her be like Israel shouldn't exist or anything like that, or even intimate that. I've never heard anything anti-Semitic out of AOC. Don't get me started.
No. I wasn't going to say she's done it. I was going to say that there was one cringe moment where like she was voting against, I think it was the Iron Dome.
Yeah, people say that.
I think she voted for it in the end, but she like cried while she did it. I think that was a bit silly, but I agree with you that she's not like Jeremy Corbyn style. Like,
and even that moment, I think people mischaracterize, but we don't have to get into it. But in general, I think that she is on like the right side of most of these issues. I struggle to think. There was one thing that I disagree with her on, which is when she said like ignore the courts. But I think she said it one time. If she kept saying it was on.
What was that one on?
It was on mifepristone and the abortion pill, and like whether or not you should listen to the court when it says not to.
Yeah. See, I'm an institutionalist at the end of the day, I guess. Like,
I can imagine a world where AOC kept saying shit like that, like ignore the courts, where I'd be like, okay, I can't support her anymore. But in general, I think that was one time. I don't think that she's
talking like that right now.
Yeah.
She's not talking like that right now.
And I think if she was pushed on the campaign trail, I think she would be like, listen, I didn't mean it like that. It kind of meant to like find some other way to do it or something, and to explain that statement. But again, given what we were up against in the crazy cavalcade of corruption, to me, it's not a big deal, and I don't think that it would govern her philosophy. And I think there are natural institutional barriers, even if I thought AOC was inclined to do kind of extreme change, that would prevent her from doing so in a way that But in some cases, I think there needs to be extreme change, and frankly, I think that there is a way that we can build a coalition with the. I'm not committed to this actually, but the kind of abundance type people, I think that there's a way to pave a road perhaps. I'm not committed to that because I have to finish reading the book. I'm close to finishing it, and so I haven't fully distilled my thoughts. But we'll see what we come up with there, and what I come up with there. But I'm not. Go ahead.
If AOC can somehow like sort of distill the abundance agenda, I think that would be extremely powerful. But we'll see. Yeah,
we'll see. And I think that it needs to be a grand coalition to defeat. This kind of.
I do agree. Grand coalition.
But yeah, listen, brother.
All right, man. I actually have to head. But no, thank you. It was really good to talk. It's funny because I actually now look back on where I was in January with so much frustration with myself. I was being a feckless moderate, and then now like just. There's nothing that you can compromise with when it comes to these people. They're just evil as and it's proven that over the past 2-3 months. And look, we'll probably we'll have to stream again sometime because we probably see eye to eye on like most things these days.
No, I appreciate that, and thank you for coming by, and let's chat again soon.
Yeah, thank you, man. Cheers. Have a good one, guys. Thank you so much.
Later. Okay, good shit, folks.